Teaching skills. Teaching writing. In a previous input, we looked into speaking skills, and in this input, let's consider another productive skill, writing. Unlike speaking, which is a natural skill, writing is learned, and it presents learners with many difficulties. To begin our exploration, let's think about and make some notes to these two questions. What are some of the issues that learners may have with writing? And what are some types of writing that learners can use to practice in the class or for homework? Pause the video and make a note of your ideas on your task sheet. If possible, discuss your ideas with a partner, and when you're ready, click to continue. There are many potential issues for learners at different ages and stages of learning the language. This list shows some of the main ones to consider. Spelling, punctuation, cohesion and coherence, L1 interference, style and register, motivation, genre or text type, syntax, and fluency, getting your thoughts onto paper. Our course materials usually provide a number of text types or genres which learners should be able to produce, and these can include the following: letters, stories, essays and compositions of various types, poems and rhymes, diary writing, note-taking, email, and social media posts and updates. Of course, there are many others. And if your course material doesn't provide a range of text types that appeal to your learners, you'll need to likely want to adapt or supplement to the learning needs and interests of the children that you teach. One of the problems with writing during language lessons is that writing can become little more than written grammar or vocabulary practice. The focus isn't on the skill, but on writing as a vehicle for learning language systems. There are many possible ways to run writing tasks in class or for homework, and the key thing is that writing skills should align to real-life purposes. We often use the acronym APT, APT, to describe this approach. APT stands for audience, purpose, and topic. Authentic writing practice will always have these three attributes, and as we move through this input, I'd like you to keep that in mind. One simple way of getting into writing is to give your learners a topic, a purpose, for example, comparing and contrasting ideas, discussing something, writing a story, summarizing, giving an overview, or describing somewhere, someone, or something, and tell them who their audience is. Each audience will require a slightly different approach. They could, for example, be writing for a student magazine, or a class web page, or simply to share with a family member. Pause the video for a moment. What do you think are some benefits of free writing activities? Make some notes on your task sheet. There are many benefits to this type of free writing activity. Of course, much will depend on the age and level of your learners. Writing a text obviously means that the learner has the language and skills to produce a meaningful piece of work in the first place. But assuming they do, some of the potential benefits include the following. Free writing focuses on both content and meaning. It focuses on fluency in writing, the ability to structure and connect ideas in the text. It will develop awareness of the effect on the reader. Readers always have a clear intention to their reading, and they have expectations about what they'll read. It can help a lot to develop writing speed and automaticity, the ability to be fluent in that writing. It builds confidence with communication, and our learners develop awareness of style and language items and register. Register means the level of formality which affects the choice of language. It can remove writing block or a fear of writing, and, for younger learners particularly, it can build stamina, since they need to first develop the hand and arm muscles to control the pencil or pen. Free writing has a lot of benefits for fluency. However, you need to balance this with a focus on accuracy. Accuracy here covers not only the correct use of grammar, but also appropriacy, range and use of language in context, and for a specific audience and purpose. It can also include format. Learners need to notice language in form in order to learn it. And one way that you can provide this type of practice is by reconstructing a text. We consider text reconstruction a form of bottom-up approach, whereas free writing could be considered to be more top-down. You're going to read a short news article and then try to reconstruct it using some prompts. In a moment, pause the video and read the short article. There's no need to memorize, just read it at normal speed a couple of times so that you understand the meaning. When you're ready, move to the next screen and use those prompts to reconstruct the text. We also include the prompts on your task sheet to help you. Finally, continue to the next screen and compare your version of the text with the original. Make a note of what is the same or different. Is the meaning the same even if the language differs? And be ready to discuss this with your group and in the online tutorial later. So when you're ready, we're going to move and look at the text. So here's the news clipping. Now pause the video a while and read it. Read it 2 or 3 times at normal speed, and like I said, it's not important to try and memorize. When you've finished, click to continue to the next stage and reconstruct the text using the prompts. Use these prompts to help you reconstruct the text on your task sheet. Pause the video to do this, and when you're ready, click to continue. Next, you'll be able to see the original text again and compare and contrast your own version. Here's the news clipping again. Pause the video now and compare your reconstructed version. And after checking, make a note of some potential benefits of this kind of writing task. You should consider using texts like these, firstly, for reading practice. After reading and understanding the texts, learners then reconstruct using prompts similar to the ones you've used in this example. When you're ready, click to continue. How did you get on? What was the same or different in your version compared with the original? As a teacher, how would you feed back to learners on their different versions? This needs some thought, and you might want to pause briefly and make a note of your ideas, but also note any questions you can share and discuss with your group and tutor later. But for now, let's think about how this type of activity can help learners. Reconstructing a text is a sophisticated form of practice. From experience, I've found that short texts work best, around 100 words or so. Reconstruction tasks push learners to use a wide range of language forms and lexical items. Some benefits include the following. It combines a bottom-up approach with a top-down focus. It encourages learners to notice the gap between their own language and the language used in the authentic or partially graded text. It's communicative, and it can integrate all 4 skills. It can easily be adapted and expanded. For example, learners could reconstruct in pairs. With older learners, they could swap texts and give peer feedback according to criteria that you set for them. And there is a focus on both accuracy and meaning. Writing and speaking are both productive skills. We've noted that speaking is a natural skill. We learn to speak more or less from the moment we're born. Writing, however, is a learned skill. It's a sign of education, and it takes many years of study and practice to develop. It's worth pointing out that not everyone becomes a fluent, confident writer even in their own language. And for children learning to write in a second language, we need to have realistic expectations of what we can achieve in the early years. We need to be clear that speaking is not written English spoken aloud, and neither is written English speaking in written form. There may be a crossover, but they have different structures, different grammars and lexis, and they fundamentally work in different ways. Leading ELT researcher Michael Halliday studied writing throughout his career, and he wrote that written language is not spoken language written down. Writing and speaking are not just alternate ways of doing the same thing. Rather, they are ways of doing different things. And that's worth some exploration. In what ways do they differ? It's a complex area, so let's keep our focus on what we need to know as teachers rather than as linguists or discourse analysts. So pause the video and think about this. What are some of the main differences between speaking and writing? For example, speaking is largely temporary, whereas writing has more permanence. Of course, there is a grey area. Speech can be recorded and writing can be deleted. But generally speaking, in day-to-day communication, speech is gone after we've said it, and writing remains on the page or screen more or less indefinitely. Now, make a note of other significant differences on your task sheet, and when you're ready, click to continue. Let's start with speaking. With the exception of recorded speech, it's mostly temporary. The expressive features that we use to communicate include stress, intonation, loudness, and pauses. We refer to this as prosody. There is a grammar of speech, and it includes repetitions, unfinished sentences, changes of structure during mid-sentence, false starts, and recasts. In fact, we can't really refer to sentences in the context of speaking, since speech is constructed phrase by phrase, clause by clause. When we're speaking, we get instant feedback during the interaction. This means that misunderstandings or a failure to follow a chain of thought and the regular communication breakdowns that happen can all be repaired. We often refer to this as the negotiation of meaning. And lastly, the paralinguistic features used to aid expression include facial and physical gestures and expressions, as well as body language. So now let's compare those with writing. Writing, we've already said, has more permanence. And the expressive features include capitalization, paragraphing, italics, and punctuation, and more, emoji and other graphic devices. Mistakes in grammar in writing are unacceptable, and they can reflect badly on the writer. And usually there's no immediate feedback. Text messages are an exception. Writing is frequently planned in advance, and it's checked before it's published. Paralinguistic features of writing include pictures, diagrams, sometimes illustrations, and other graphic forms. Writing is a complex skill, and it combines many factors. So far in this input, we've touched on some of the main issues which inform the way we teach writing. Well, now let's turn our attention to some types of writing practice used in many classrooms, and we'll consider what they are and the aims of each one. We're going to look at copying, controlled writing, guided writing. We're going to revisit free writing, and also look briefly at an approach called process writing. So copying. The possible aims of copying activities are to consolidate oral work and to enable students to master the elementary mechanics of written English, for example, handwriting, spelling, punctuation, word order, and general control over the writing process. Activities can include copying tables and other items from the board, writing sentences from substitution tables, arranging given words into coherent sentences, or gap filling from given alternatives. We mentioned before, and it's important to reiterate here, that none of these represent real-life writing. Well, beyond academic purposes, that is. Real-life writing will always have an audience, purpose, and topic. Although you could argue that the audience is the learner themselves, the purpose is to learn, and the topic is whatever item they're actually copying at the time. Controlled writing. This helps to develop learners' awareness of logical choice and the organization of written language. There are many types of controlled writing practice. For example, we can link sentences with alternatives. Here's an example. Last week, Mr. or Mrs. Smith took his or her children to the cinema, theatre, or zoo to see a play, the animals, a film. Unfortunately, or luckily, they couldn't or were able to. This type of controlled writing practice limits the amount of choice that learners have, and it helps them pay attention to specific forms within the text. So while it's not a full writing task of the type that exists in the real world, it does have large benefits, and it also reduces the amount of language that any young learner needs to produce. Here are some more activities for controlled writing. You can reconstruct a paragraph by ordering the given sentences. You could give the opening and closing sentences to prompt and support the learners. Parallel writing. Here, learners write a narrative identical to one built by the teacher, and they substitute words or simple phrases. Lastly, students can convert a series of sentences into a coherent and cohesive passage by inserting linkers, cohesive devices such as but, however, on the other hand, etc., at appropriate points in the text. Guided writing. Guided writing aims to give students more freedom of choice and expression. Weaker learners can receive adequate guidance, while stronger ones can demonstrate their ability. So it's a multi-level task. Some guidance is still given to learners, so that writing doesn't become a test of imagination, and learners have a choice in the selection of tense and vocabulary to make it a more personable experience. Activities for guided writing include writing a letter, applying for a job, stating A, where you saw the post advertised, B, personal details, and C, qualifications. Writing from a picture sequence. Students write a narrative based around a series of pictures, or objects even. And story completion. Students are given the beginning and the end, and they have to write the middle, or some other section. These types of guided writing tasks are very common in exams, because they provide the structure that many learners need, reduces the need for them to be imaginative and creative in thought, but it still provides a fair test of language. Your job in the classroom is to make sure that it isn't a test, that there's a learning opportunity attached, and that depends on the way that you actually work on it. Free writing. We've looked at this already, and it provides learners with opportunities for expression and personally meaningful communication through writing. It also can help train learners to produce different genre and styles of written text. Activities for this could include using props, real objects, pictures, and other similar prompts to stimulate their imagination. You could set a time limit and make sure you refer to the audience, purpose, and topic of the text to make it meaningful. You could link the topic of the text to your lesson and set it as a quick lead-in activity. For example, they could write quickly for 5 minutes to activate knowledge and language based on the topic you've chosen or the one in their course materials. Now let's look at another approach to writing called process writing. There are two main ways to approach writing. We can see it as a product or as a process. And so far we've mostly considered products, for example, the end result. So process writing is an approach that teaches learners to work through a series of stages to produce a text. And the focus is on the steps they take rather than a final polished piece of writing, although it can include that. Here, very briefly, are the stages of a process writing task. We begin with drafting. Individual learners or groups draft a text. Then there's a feedback stage. The feedback can come from peers and the teacher on content, communication, use of language, and the effect on the reader. After the feedback, the individuals or groups go back and they rewrite or further draft to improve it through successive stages. Subsequent feedback could focus on areas of accuracy, the range of language, and stylistic features of the text, including its layout. And once you've gone through a series of feedback stages and redrafting stages, finally the learners will publish the text. And in this context, publishing means simply sharing it so that others can read and enjoy. So learners share, read, and comment on their texts. They could read them out, or you could record them in video or audio, or you could display them on a board, a website, or a sharing platform, etc. Process writing is very, very effective, but it takes time, so many of us will simply give learners a model text and ask them to imitate it. In those cases, we're thinking more about the outcome or the product of writing. But you can combine different stages and include various redrafting stages during a writing task to push learners in the right direction. It's worth experimenting with, and you should ask more questions about this in your online tutorial if you're interested. The activities we've discussed so far are quite generic, and they could be used at different ages and levels. With younger children, we have other issues to consider when we work on writing skills. Literacy development is a major concern in the early years, and it involves a large amount of time spent on developing phonological awareness, letter recognition, learning sight words, and building phonics skills, the ability to decode and encode sound-letter correspondence. At the early stages, we also need to build learners' eye-hand coordination as well as their fine and gross motor skills. In the primary years, this work continues, but we gradually move from writing words and short phrases and sentences to paragraphs and longer texts, and we also start to introduce a wider range of text types or genre. In this section, let's look more into activities suitable for children in the primary years and above. Activities that lead to writing. Tracing and copying are natural ways to build the motor skills, as well as provide scaffolding for younger learners. And there are plenty of simple writing activities that help children develop their basic skills and gain confidence with written language in the early stages. Could copy, write from memory a word or a phrase that matches the picture. They could write labels and captions. Finish the word. They could write the word. Dictation is also a possibility. They could copy or write the names of the people in a story. They could copy or write out the story in the right order. They could copy the phrase or sentence, putting in a missing word. And there are certain types of writing races and writing chains where one learner begins and then passes the paper to the next and gradually build up a text. That's quite motivating, and again, because they're writing in short bursts, it limits the amount of time that they need to spend writing each time. Even though a lot of written communication these days is done on keyboards and touchscreens, handwriting and a correct writing posture still remain essential and carry an element of prestige. They're a sign of a good education. But it's tiring for children to write. The muscles need developing to cope with the types of writing that they need for their general schooling. When learners write, they must pay attention to several things at the same time. They need to develop wrist, hand and finger control and be tidy. They need to form upper and lowercase letters in print and then precursive and finally cursive script. They need to become familiar with the relationships between letters and sounds. And they need to keep a picture of the letters and words or phrases in their minds. They also need to learn the nuts and bolts of writing, capital letters, and how to punctuate text. Handwriting will always be important, but the reality of modern life means that you shouldn't neglect keyboard skills entirely. There are many freely available programs that you could suggest to parents. In the classroom, you should keep keyboard skills in mind and find opportunities to include keyboard work for writing. If it's not possible to actually type, then you could use images of printed keyboards as a fun and simple ways to raise awareness. In your classroom, or as a suggestion for homework, you should help your learners learn the QWERTY keyboard layout. Learn about the various punctuation marks and functions of keyboards. Learn, to some level, how to type and how to sit properly while typing or using a computer. And you could teach them language for using computers as well. For example, type or press return, press shift, backshift. There are many words that are specific to the use of keyboards. Writing can take a long time in the classroom, and many teachers feel that the best use of precious class time is to prepare the children to write at home. It makes sense to focus your lesson plans on areas which need a teacher to assist, for example, speaking practice. There are many options for extending speaking or other skills-based activities into writing. Thinking back to our concern that writing should be apt, you could ask them to write their text as an email, post it on a group chat, or share it on a website. Learners can write about what they've already talked or read about or even listened to. They could write after talking about themselves, their likes, experiences, interests, family, daily life, etc. They could write a description of a memory from a photo or video, picture or storybook scene. They could write a description, read it out, and the others guess who, what or where it is. Or they could write questions and answers about a picture or other form of input. As with speaking, reading can also be a springboard into writing. All kinds of written genre are possible, including character posters, writing descriptions of people, places and events, writing a new or different ending to a story, adapting or personalizing a story or some other text by changing key information, writing about their favorite part of a book or their favorite character and why they like that thing or her or him. Other written activities can lead back into writing. For example, memory games such as remembering lists or facts. Guessing games. Is it an animal? Do you like it? Can you eat it? You could also ask learners to research interesting facts and figures about a topic and then write quiz questions they can then do as a group activity. Writing is often seen as a solitary activity, but it doesn't need to be. Popular tools such as Google Docs and wiki-based programs enable learners to co-author texts and share them easily. Writing on paper can have similar benefits if we set things up well and we make sure that everyone has a role to play in the writing process. Asking your learners to write about a known story is a good way to begin. To do this, learners should already know the story, maybe it's in Chinese, and they will have already talked or understood the characters and maybe the main events in the story. You could then ask your learners to summarize it, write down what they remember with the help of the teacher, or draw pictures to show what happens and then write short captions. They could also write speech bubbles for text. We've mentioned free writing a number of times, and is a good way to develop self-confidence and fluency, and for children to use all the language that they have at their disposal to communicate something that's personally meaningful. Free writing is about communicating with others, and you should be sensitive how you respond to their written output. All creative effort should be praised and encouraged. Spelling and handwriting can be looked at separately. Don't make it the main event. The message is the key. Respond to content first, and don't get bogged down by error correction. Use the learner's texts for evaluating their progress. Read them and see what areas need more attention, remedial work, or what you could teach next to improve the writing next time. You may notice a number of common errors or issues that you could deal with in a whole class activity. Writing about people. Selecting interesting and relevant topics for learners to write about will increase the motivation and interest. And as we've mentioned several times, learners always need an audience. It could be you, the teacher, or parents, other children, real people, companies and organizations. And they need a clear purpose. Given that young children's experience of the world is limited by their age, it's possible to create all kinds of interesting and imaginative writing tasks that are creative and fun and easy to do. Writing about people is one such area, and it brings a wide range of language into play. Not only can children draw pictures, but they could use photos or other visuals to support their written work. Let's look at a simple activity sequence that can work with children of different ages and levels. First, draw a simple body outline on the board or on a poster. Then, ask learners to ask and answer questions about this person. It could be the name, age, if it's a boy or a girl, etc. Take the role of secretary and write the ideas on the board. Work together with the students to show how these answers can become a written description. Show them how to organize the information into phrases, sentences, and maybe paragraphs. You can focus on linking words, punctuation, cohesive devices, and all kinds of other textual features. Learners can adapt the text and draw or make up an imaginary person. You could turn it into a guessing game, asking and answering questions about that person. And always include a publishing stage. You could choose the funniest, the craziest, etc. This picture shows an example of it happening in a classroom. You can see that here the teachers added some details, the type of hair, their legs, whether they're long or short, the clothes that they're wearing. There are many ways to extend this into different areas of language practice. Making books combines many important areas for young learner education. The language work is complemented by craft and creative work, and it enables children to explore the use of different media and, more than anything, it can be great fun. Children get a tremendous sense of achievement for making a class or an individual book. The book could be real, on paper, or it could be digital, using a software program such as PowerPoint or others. The learners can listen and make a book of short stories, an anthology of their poems, a yearbook, or they could write a longer text, such as the adventures of a favourite character from a story or film. And books can be bound in different ways. They can be big or small, they can combine different media, as well as written or printed text. They can have different shapes. One popular project in many classrooms is to create over time a set of class reading books made by the students. You could assign different sections to groups of learners, or each child can take the book home and create a page each week. The possibilities here are virtually limitless. When learners make things for others to see, they have a real audience, so they want to write something interesting. They have a reason to be neat and tidy. They can learn how to make improvements. You can bring outside knowledge into the classroom. And it compares their work with others, which means that they can learn from each other, which is a very natural thing for younger learners. E-pals. In the age before digital technology, it was common for teachers to set up pen pals. Each child could correspond with a child in their own country, or, even better, an English-speaking country. These days, even more opportunities are available through the use of new text types, such as email, SMS, and various forms of status updates. And it's easier than ever to combine media with text, so even lower-level learners can produce some meaningful written work. Connecting with a class or individuals in another country or region is practical and an authentic way of using English. It allows learners to experience the real value of using English, to communicate and find out and share experiences with people of other places. Learners find out about other people's attitudes and ways of doing things. It opens their minds to the world, and it can lead to real friendship and global mindedness. Lastly, some advice. Don't dominate, let the learners have choice. In a learner-centered classroom, the learners are stakeholders in their own learning and development, under the guidance of you, the teacher. Developing learning independence is a critical part of our work. One way to exercise this is to allow learners some freedom to choose who, what, and why they are writing. Give children as much control as possible over what they are going to write about and how they do it. Let them write about what they're interested in. Could be their home, family, interests and hobbies. Their friends or imaginary people, and things that happen in their lives are all rich sources of ideas for writing, and they lead to increased focus and motivation. Summing up. Writing is a complex skill, and one which is learned over many years. As teachers of English, we have a dual focus. We want to develop our learners' language ability, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. We also want to focus on writing as a skill. Writing is a common activity in the classroom, but we can't claim that every time a learner writes, they're practicing writing. Many times we use writing for language development, for example in grammar activities. The key points we've noted today are writing is a physical skill and a language skill. Writing comes from other language work and it needs preparation. Communication is more important than grammar, spelling and handwriting in the early days especially. You should praise and respect all efforts and display learners' written work, a process we refer to as publishing. You should keep and reuse written work as a source of further input in the classroom. And learners need support and preparation before they write, as well as opportunities to talk about and comment on their text afterwards. Writing doesn't need to take up a lot of class time. When you plan your lessons, your aim could be to prepare learners to write their final draft at home, and the process model we looked at briefly is useful for this. On the other hand, you've seen how there are many types of writing, both digital or handwritten, that needn't take a lot of time to prepare, set up and do. Photo captions, labels, notices and signs are all authentic types of writing that can easily be completed in a single lesson. If you have the opportunity, try out different ideas from this input in a class that you teach. You could also draft some lesson outlines for your teaching practice so that you're ready to teach writing. Share them with your group and get their feedback on suggestions of your ideas. We've reached the end, so as usual before you finish, spend a little time now to review your notes, and you might have questions about staging writing tasks, or you might want to know more about the ideas we've discussed here. In that case, write them down and get ready to discuss what you've learned and your own ideas with your group, and later in your online tutorial. I hope you found this interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll be with you next time. Bye for now.